When Mario Kart World was first released, there was a lot of anticipation about how crazy the shortcuts would be thanks to the new mechanics we saw in the trailers. Now, after 6 months, it's fair to say that our expectations have been lived up to and more, because there have been so many ridiculous shortcuts found on all the tracks in the game. In today's video, I'm going to be going through each track and naming the craziest shortcut I think there is. These won't necessarily be the biggest time saves on each track, I'm instead basing it on how surprised I think I'd have been if I saw them when the game first came out. If you enjoy this type of content, then be sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel, it would be much appreciated. With that said, let's get into the video. Starting off with Mario Bros Circuit, I have a shortcut that you may have never seen before, at least not the fastest version of it anyway. If you have watched the world record on this track, you will know about the ending shortcut through the boxes using a mushroom, which on its own is pretty impressive, but did you know you could do it shroomless? Well, if you watched my video on shortcuts you've never seen before, then you will know about this, but I didn't fully show how ridiculous this shortcut can be. If you haven't seen it before, you can do a charge jump into the left rail, then shake your controller to trick back off the rail on the first frame, which gives you much more height than normal, letting you land on the platform to skip the off-road turn. This mechanic is really weird, so it definitely fits the criteria of this video, but there is even more to this shortcut I haven't mentioned yet. Normally you would just land on the platform and then trick back onto the road when doing this shortcut, but how about instead you just do this? Yeah, you can use the boxes to bounce onto the rail. It's not at all consistent, so I wouldn't advise trying it in a race, but it is insane to watch and definitely qualifies as a crazy enough shortcut to start off the video. Crown City is next up, and this shortcut is one that hasn't yet been implemented into world records as of recording, but definitely will be soon enough. Currently, the world record uses one mushroom for an already crazy shortcut on section 1, then the other 2 mushrooms for the 2 grass cuts at the start of section 3. That will soon change though, because there is a recently discovered method to get past the first grass cut on section 3 without any mushrooms, and for some reason it also uses a bounce off some boxes. Take a look. That's right, you can do a double pole bounce into a box bounce to save about 1/10 of a second and of course hold on to a mushroom. I don't know where the extra mushroom would be used, but that isn't my problem. All I know is that if I saw this shortcut on day 1, I would have been speechless. Not every shortcut in this video is a recent discovery, because there are some that were found pretty early that are still crazy to watch, and the Whistlestop Summit ending shortcut is a perfect example of that. When you look at the track, it doesn't look like the rail should at all be accessible without a feather, so the fact you can get there is pretty crazy in itself. Not to mention that the sequence you have to do to pull it off is also a bit mental compared to your average shortcut. I also found a different way to do it using the same mechanic as the first shortcut in this video. It is pretty cursed, but once again I would have been impressed by it on day 1. Now you'd think DK Spaceport would be a track without any outrageous strategy since it is filled with straightaway sections, but there was recently a very unique strategy discovered that might actually be useful for online races or shroomless time trials on the track. After doing the gap cut at the start, you can jump off the track and trick off some poles to get a respawn in the middle of the glider. And since there are no coins at the start of the track, this could actually be used in shroomless time trials if it turns out to be faster than the world record strategy, which to be fair would also qualify for this video for sure. From what I've seen, it's very close between the 2 as to which is faster, so I can't be sure whether a perfect respawn will make it into shroomless world records, but even if it doesn't, it's still very unique and could definitely be used as a strategy online if it's consistent enough. Desert Hills had an obvious choice for me. The ending shortcut that Cole has been using to dominate the track since July is still one of the most difficult and impressive shortcuts in the game. The trick timing is incredibly precise to detach from the wall and land on the sign to get a clean transition onto the final wall. It was also an easy choice for Shy Guy Bazaar. The charge jump over the wall along with the sequence before it is a really cool shortcut. It is much easier than it looks as well. Detaching from the wall, then instantly tricking from the red rail to the rail below is very fun. Then of course the charge jump itself is fairly precise but consistent enough if you practice it. I had many to choose from for Wario Stadium. The entire track is filled with crazy rail shortcuts. I've gone with one that I've actually never done before. The lap 1 shortcut where you detach from the wall on the right and then trick from the rail onto the signs to set yourself up for the coin route. I simply can't believe you don't get counted out of bounds here, but I suppose that could also be said for the massive rail cut just before it too. I'm glad Nintendo on the whole was a bit more generous with lag 2 in this game than in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. I think they knew that the mechanics in this game would result in crazy shortcuts like these being discovered. Although I must say this generosity doesn't really do much for Airship Fortress, because this track doesn't really have any spectacular shortcuts. It is more about small strategies that can be used to gain incremental amounts of time across a run. The only option I really have is the charge jump shortcut at the end, which I was impressed by when I first saw it, but it's definitely one of the tamest shortcuts in the video. A track that doesn't lack shortcuts, however, is DK Pass, the double tree bounce being the standout on the track. Going from a wall ride into 2 tree bouncers to clear all the off-road on the left is pretty cool. I would have definitely enjoyed watching this shortcut on day 1, as my first impressions of this track weren't all that good. We have quite a run of tracks with shortcuts used in world records going here, because the Starview Peak Shroomless shortcut is just insane. It doesn't look like a wall ride is possible there at all thanks to how thin it is, and then the airtime you get from the jump is more than it feels like it should be. It's crazy to watch. After that, we have Sky High Sunday, a track with a similar shortcut situation to Airship Fortress, as the only interesting shortcut there really is the wall ride on the final turn. To be fair though, you do go incredibly low on the wall when doing the fastest strategy. It looks very dangerous at face value and saves quite a lot of time. Wario's Shipyard has a couple of pretty interesting strategies not used in world records, with the standout one being the alternate route at the ending water section. Normally you would jump onto the rail on the left, then switch over to the rail on the right, which is a fairly obvious path, but it is still pretty cool. However, there was a discovery made a month ago that you can charge jump to the right, trick off the pole, then land on this wall, then trick into another pole to get to the road below. All of which is pretty spectacular. This saves around 1/10 of a second on lap 2 and 3, so I'm sure it will be implemented into world records at some point. Koopa Troopa Beach only has one shortcut that isn't a normal drift, which is the charge jump through the boxes. I was fairly surprised when I first saw this shortcut. It definitely makes the track much more interesting, but it isn't in the upper echelons of crazy shortcuts at all. I was much more surprised when I first saw the Shroomless shortcut on Faraway Oasis. The height you get from tricking off the pole and diving into the water to get over the boxes is crazy. At world record level, this shortcut is extra insane because they bounce off the wall to take the turn as tight as possible. I don't really understand how it works, but it does and it's cool, and that's good enough for the video. As much as Peach Beach is my least favourite track in the game by a mile, it does have an interesting Shroomless shortcut in the middle of lap 3, where you go in between 2 floating barriers and charge jump onto the rock, getting you up to the rail on the left of the shortcut path, all without needing a mushroom. It isn't overly exciting, which does match the track in general, but it is at least something to do that isn't just drive straight through the water. Salty Salty Speedway's ending shortcut in the world record is quite cool. Charge jumping off the pole to get onto the rail is a neat trick. However, the Shroomless methods to do this cut are very strange. The easiest way to do it is to charge jump into the blue pole at the corner of the dock, then ride the wall to get onto the rail. The problem with this is that if you drive the rest of the track as fast as possible, the pole won't respawn, making it only possible on 1 lap. However, it does actually respawn if you go to the very top left of the minimap on the next lap for some reason, but that means you have to go around the shortcut at the beginning. This is such a weird mechanic and I don't understand why it's a thing, but luckily there is a way to do the Shroomless cut without the pole if need be. Unluckily though, it is complete RNG whether it works or not, so that's fun. If you charge jump anywhere on the edge of the dock, you can get a high jump onto the wall without needing the pole, but it feels totally random, so it isn't much fun to do. It does make it very unique though, certainly enough to get into this video. Dino Dino Jungle only really has one shortcut on the track, but it isn't interesting at all, so I'm just going to throw the feather variant of the shortcut into the video and live with it. Having to use the rails rather than just doing a regular mini turbo before the shortcut is fairly cool, but it isn't that crazy in all honesty. I was tempted to instead put the small strategy the world record does on the dinosaur rail, since it is something I would not at all expect to be faster, but I wasn't sure if it was enough of a shortcut to qualify. But to be fair, it is my video, so who really cares? I'm going to allow it. Great Question Block Ruins has an obvious choice. The wall ride after the rail turn is as precise, if not more, than the Starview Peak shortcut. It is such a thin wall to get onto, and getting the exit properly is insanely difficult. Your approach has to be practically perfect. Before it was discovered, I did try to make it work since this was the track I grinded in the first few days, but I never got close, so if I saw it on day one, I would definitely have been amazed by it. Cheap Falls also has an obvious choice. The Tarzan shortcut skips half the water section by tricking off 3 trees in the air for a few seconds. It's absurd. I thought the charge jump method was crazy. The height you get there is ridiculous, but the Tarzan shortcut blows it out of the water. Definitely one of the most epic looking shortcuts in the game. Dandelion Depths only really has one cool shortcut, but in fairness it is pretty insane. You can trick off the pole on the right just after the finish line to cut off the first turn. I do wish you got a bit more airtime to land on the bridge instead. When watching the shortcut, I don't get overly amazed by the distance you cover, although I would have never thought it could work in the first place, so I can't complain too much. Boo Cinema has a standout choice for me. The shortcut at the beginning in the world record where you ride up the wall then crash into a fence is very weird. You can actually do it without any mushrooms as well. I don't know if it's any faster than just going around normally, but it isn't too difficult if you want to try it out. Drybones Burnout is a track filled with interesting strategies, especially in the final section. The most spectacular of those is probably the double wall ride shortcut, where you detach from the right wall to land on the rock in the middle, then trick off the rail to get onto the left wall, which gives you enough momentum to get over the final lava pit. It is very much a backup strategy because it's slower than taking the same lines as the world record, but that doesn't take away from how spectacular it looks. Moo Moo Meadows has had quite a few cool shortcut discoveries like the tree bounce or the cow bouncers, but I am going to go for something completely different that you probably don't know about. After tricking off the wooden ramp shortcut, you can use a mushroom to charge jump onto the cliff on the left, then use another mushroom to trick off the tree and get onto the rail, allowing you to then trick right over the final grass patch. Whether this is actually worth it compared to just doing the regular wall ride shortcut here, I'm unsure about, but it's definitely a crazy trick worth mentioning. I'm very surprised all of this is not out of bounds. Charge jumps in general have been much more useful than everyone expected them to be, and Choco Mountain is an obvious example of that. The Superman cut is just ridiculous. You get such an abnormal amount of height to get over all the chocolate. I don't understand why it works now, so I definitely would have been confused by it on day one. Toad's Factory doesn't really have any outstanding shortcuts you can do in time trials, so I've decided to include the feather shortcut on the final turn. If you charge jump off the right side of the boost ramp and aim towards the right side of the crane, you can get enough distance to land on the tractor if you use a feather halfway through. It is quite a big jump to make, which makes it very satisfying to pull off. Bowser's Castle is a track known for its crazy shortcuts, the most obscene one being the wall ride turn before the second glider. Going underneath the lava fall is crazy. The fact you don't get hit when doing this shortcut is pretty mental. The setup by tricking off the pole is also very cool. The whole thing is just one of the most enjoyable to watch in the game, especially with how fast it looks in the world record. If you want something just as crazy as this shortcut, then you can do something else if you have a mushroom here, because in my video where I try to avoid every glider in Mario Kart World, I managed to find a way to skip the second glider by charge jumping on the left side of the ramp and tricking off the top minis, thank you for clarifying the name, to get over to the other side. This is an even bigger jump than the Toad's Factory feather cut. It is quite something to watch and it actually isn't too difficult. Probably not worth going for on a race, but still very much a crazy shortcut. For Acorn Heights, it was an obvious pick. The world record strategy for the Shroomless shortcut is just class. Combining 2 rails, 2 wall rides and a pole trick to skip the off-road is a very fun sequence to do. It is the type of shortcut that you look forward to doing in races. Not to mention how many other methods there are to get past this off-road as well. The variety here is something I heavily appreciate now and would have back on day one. Now you'd think Mario Circuit would be the track with the least interesting shortcut in the video, but that assumption is very wrong. You will know about the regular 2 mushroom shortcut on this track, but did you know you can actually do this entire thing shroomless? If you try to jump onto the wall on the left, Lac 2 will pick you up, stopping you from skipping all the off-road. Well, that isn't strictly true, because if you stay on the very edge of the wall, then Lac 2 won't interfere. The problem is that it's possibly the hardest shortcut in the game to pull off, because it's so ridiculously precise. And whilst it is faster than going around the off-road cut, it is not even worth doing for world record runs, because the exit isn't fast, and the 2 mushrooms you save can't be used anywhere else to gain more time. That is isn't a problem for this video though. It is technically a shortcut and is certainly a crazy one. Peach Stadium has an obvious choice to me. The wall ride on the U-turn still looks like it shouldn't be possible, so if I saw it on day one, I would have been confused out of my mind. I do want to briefly mention that there is another crazy wall ride trick on this track that hasn't yet been implemented into world records, where you take the entire final turn by non-stop tricking on the inside of the road. It saves about 1/10 of a second per lap, so definitely nothing for online play, but it will make the world records even more impressive than they are at the moment. Finally, we have Rainbow Road, a track that does have quite a lot of niche strategies you may not have seen before, and of course there are the big shortcuts like the gap cut at the end of lap 2 and the pole shortcut at the end. The cut I'm including as the final shortcut in this video though is something that was discovered very recently. It is an absurd shortcut for very little time gain. When approaching the glider before the huge pole shortcut, you would normally just drive on the road and gather a couple of super mini turbos to go fast. But what if instead you just decide to do this? Yes, that is a real shortcut. You can charge jump over the fence and wall ride on the cloud to get back to the glider ramp. I couldn't believe it when I saw this was possible. It makes me very glad I don't time trial this track, because having to do this near the end of a 4-minute track for a very small time save does not sound like fun. But from a viewer perspective, it would be unreal to see this be done at a world record. And that is the final shortcut in the video. Let me know in the comments if there are any you think I've missed, and once again be sure to subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Thanks for watching.